For their whole career, the band Snot was labeled as a nu metal act, but they were so much more. Founder and guitarist Mikey Doling would reject the nu metal label, describing Snot as a rock band with a punk heart, as he told the Good Company with Bowling YouTube channel. Snot's sound was due to their diverse influences that the members had, combining elements of funk, punk, and metal. In just 3 short years, Snot would go from formation to signing a record deal to putting out their first album and playing Ozfest, sadly to only see it come crashing down. Snot's history would close just as nu metal was about to blow up, and in today's story, we're going to take a look at the history of the band. Snot frontman Lynn Strait was a complicated person. At just the age of 27, he had suffered through addiction. He already racked up a pretty big rap sheet, including multiple arrests for burglary, assaulting a police officer, and drug possession. One arrest even saw him tell the officer that he was the frontman for one of the biggest metal bands in the world. More on that later on. Despite his personal problems, he oozed charisma, and his friends and bandmates remember him as a loyal friend, with Snot guitarist Sonny Mayo recalling to Louder Sound, "On one level, he was a criminal. On the other level, he'd love you more passionately than you've ever been loved." He was somewhere in the middle of those extremes. Formed in 1994 in Santa Barbara, Snot would be founded by guitarist Mikey Doling, who grew up around Indio. He was hugely influenced by a funk punk band out of Santa Barbara called Bad Neighbor. Mikey knew Lynn all the way back to the late 80s. At the time, Lynn was actually playing bass in a band called Lethal Dose. He wasn't a singer just yet, but Lethal Dose would play gigs with Doling's band at the time, a metal outfit called Chronics. By the early 90s, Chronics had fallen apart, and Mikey soon started a new band with 2 other musicians, but they didn't have a frontman yet. Doling had a 4-track recorder which he'd recorded songs on, and he called that early demo Eat Snot. This project would eventually morph into the band we know as Snot. As for the name, Mikey was jamming with a bass player at the time named Ruben Gonzalez. Gonzalez had suggested the name Snot, and I'm paraphrasing here, saying that the music of the band was going to be so good they could literally call it anything, even Snot, and thus the band's name was born. Mikey would reveal another name he had for the band was the Unscarred. Phil Anselmo of Pantera actually has a tattoo on his stomach that says Unscarred, and he always liked that name. Snot would have several other Pantera connections, which we'll get to in a bit. It was in 1994 that Mikey, on the hunt for a vocalist, went to a pizza shop called Buster's that also doubled as a music venue. Performing at the restaurant that night was a punk band called Glue. Fronting the group was this young, charismatic, and crazy singer who was stage diving into the audience and landing back first on a table full of beer pitchers and pizza. Keep in mind, there were families with kids sitting at the tables. That frontman would be Lynn Strait, and Mikey was shocked. He had no idea Lynn could sing, and he was also mesmerized by his performance. Lynn, by this point, had already gone to prison, getting into all sorts of trouble, and Mikey would tell the Knotfest podcast that Lynn had spent about a year in jail for drugs, and he was newly released and sober. Mikey also happened to be friends with the guys in the band Ugly Kid Joe, more specifically drummer Shannon Larkin. Ugly Kid Joe was also from Santa Barbara. If you guys are interested, I've actually done a whole video on them and their career. The link is down below. Larkin would give Mikey a cassette tape of 3 musicians he knew from the East Coast, including guitarist Sonny Mayo, bassist John Toomer Fonstock, and drummer Jamie Miller. Larkin had previously played with some of the musicians in a band called MF Pitbulls. Guitarist Sonny Mayo was actually the last person to join Snot. Toomer and Miller went out to Santa Barbara first, and then Mikey quickly realized after some rehearsals they needed a second guitar player. So Toomer and Miller knew the perfect guy, which was Sonny Mayo. Sonny would tell the Good Company with Bowling YouTube channel that he was at home Easter Sunday in 1995 playing NBA Live 95 when he got a call from Lynn to join the band. On that phone call, Sonny would ask Lynn what he wanted, to which Lynn simply responded, metal, and the band's classic lineup was born. Fun fact you guys may not know is that Sonny Mayo would get his head shaved by Pantera during a gig in 1992 that made its way into one of the versions of the videos they did for their album Vulgar Display of Power. With their lineup now in tow, Sonny would recall to Louder Sound, "We basically started the scene in Santa Barbara. We started playing shows down on State Street, and there were skaters, surfers, metalheads, and every other token 90s dreadlocked, hacky sack kicking motherfucker showing up. We got it all going." Snot's musical style was an amalgamation of so many different influences. The Orange County punk scene was a huge influence on Lynn, while Mikey was really influenced by metal, bands like Slayer and Metallica, as well as Suicidal Tendencies. The other three, being from the East Coast, had much different influences, including the likes of Faith No More, James Brown, and Al Green. Lynn would call Snot's style of music Americore. Following their success in Santa Barbara, Snot wanted to move and expand to other areas, and that meant heading to Los Angeles. There was a big scene on LA's Sunset Strip by the mid-90s that would see up-and-coming bands playing at venues like the Roxy and the Whiskey, including System of a Down, Cold Chamber, and Incubus. Snot would soon trade shows with the bands from Los Angeles who wanted to play in Santa Barbara. A couple bands they did this with included Manhole and Human Waste Project. Manhole would put Snot in front of 500 people at one of their early gigs in LA, and within 3 months, Snot was selling out their own shows. One unsung hero of Snot would be Lynn's mom. Mikey would tell the Knotfest podcast that she was paying for the band's rehearsal space, their demos, gas money, per diems for food, and she spent about $60,000 of her own money to help out the band in their early days. One of the bands that Snot became really close with was System of a Down. System of a Down's fans also took the band under their wing, but not all the musicians in Los Angeles initially welcomed Snot to the city. Mikey would tell the Knotfest podcast that Des Fafara from Cold Chamber got some gangbangers from LA to confront the band and scare them out of the city, but the group simply laughed in their face and they became friends after that. Mikey speculated that Des may have had an attitude because Snot was selling more tickets than Cold Chamber was. Des would, however, tell a slightly different story in the book Louder Than Hell, revealing, "I remember Lynn Strait kept bringing Snot from Santa Barbara to Los Angeles, which pissed a lot of people off. So I walked up to Lynn in front of the Roxy one night and said, go back to Santa Barbara." And he said, "You know what? I like you and I'm a huge fan of Cold Chamber. Let's go get high." They would smoke a joint together and then head to the Roxy and do some shots of whiskey, and they soon became good friends. Lynn would reveal in the same book that the band would practice 2 doors down from a strip club, so during their downtime, they would head to the club. When the band went to rehearse, the strippers would join them, and at one point, in typical rock and roll fashion, all the members of Snot had stripper girlfriends. The strippers also financially supported the members, buying them groceries and cooking them food. Fun fact you guys may not know about Lynn was that he even performed in an adult film. The band members also had day jobs during this time, as Mikey and John worked in a wood shop, staining and building furniture. The only thing that the members could really afford to eat was Jack in the Box, which had $1 cheeseburgers. With the scene in Santa Barbara and Los Angeles blowing up, record labels, of course, took notice. Snot were being wined and dined by the labels, who even offered to buy them new clothes. At one point, one of the first offers Snot got was an $18,000 record deal from Earache Records, but they smartly declined that offer. Nick Adler would be Snot's manager, and Nick's father was a guy named Lou Adler, who would produce groups like the Mamas and the Papas, and he also co-owned the Roxy. Nick had a connection at Geffen, and Snot would ultimately sign with the label, getting a $250,000 advance. Snot would choose Geffen for a few reasons. They gave the band complete creative control, they didn't seem too corporate, and they had an illustrious roster of artists, including Guns N' Roses, Nirvana, and White Zombie. 14 months would pass since the formation of Snot and when Geffen actually signed them. By the time Snot nabbed their record deal, they had about 70% of the songs written for their debut record. They already had been playing a lot of these songs live, and they had a ton of other songs they had written and were performing as well, but they would never make the album. As Snot hit the studio, they wrote several new songs, including The Box, Get Some, and fine-tuned a few tracks, including Snooze Button. Snot's debut album, titled Get Some, would be released on May 13th, 1997. It would be the band's only studio album. Featured on the record cover was Lynn's dog, a boxer named Dobbs. Guitarist Sonny Mayo would reveal in an interview that Dobbs actually had a litter of puppies the same day as the album cover was shot. I always personally thought the object in Dobbs' nose was a ball, but it's actually a lemon. Mikey would reveal that the house that the band was actually staying at had a lemon tree in the back, and Dobbs loved to climb the tree and eat lemons. To promote the album, Geffen even held a contest called Get Snot in Your Hometown. The winner of the contest would get to see the band perform at a local venue of their choice. Mikey Doling would reveal in a press release for Get Some, people are usually standoffish when they hear our name, but not after they see us. We can get serious and tear your head off. We also make fun of everybody, including ourselves. Snot's debut album wouldn't make a huge mark on the Billboard charts, while some reviews were less than stellar, but they did land a high-profile gig playing Ozzfest in the summer of '98. But it was during one stop in Massachusetts, Lynn would land himself in trouble, as MTV reported here.
Or better yet, come out the way Snot frontman Lynn Strait did.
Probably the toilet got most famous because of Lynn Strait, the guy from Snot, Ozzfest '98.
It's Lynn from Snot, all right?
He was a very, very funny guy.
He was so naughty.
Do I have to get naked people for you to remember my name?
I was out there watching Limp Bizkit, whatever, just checking it out, and I see this head, on top of a head, walking up the stairs, and I'm like, wow, he's naked, and just in a pair of sandals and socks.
It was Fred Durst daring me to do something, and
He's at the root of everything.
He is.
He came out of the toilet totally naked.
I said, oh, come up on that bare ass naked. And he's all, oh yeah?
The police saw and they were looking for him.
And he got chased off stage by the cops, who ran into my dad's dressing room.
And that was a complete accident.
He knew that nobody would get him if he was in Ozzy's dressing room.
You know, security guards are cops, just, you know, they don't want to go in there, and they're just not allowed.
I found the first door, and I opened it up, and Sharon Osbourne standing there laughing hysterically.
He came into my dressing room, stark naked.
And her little youngest daughter's just coming out of the bathroom. What's going on? She says,
I'm taking a piss and he walks in.
Mommy, there's a man in here naked.
I'm naked, and I need to use your bathroom.
Hey, dude, can I hide you? Go on, Lynn.
Sharon, I've never met you before. I'd love to meet you under better circumstances, but if I don't run out the back right now, I'm gonna get arrested.
I'm throwing stage clothes at him. If Ozzy's to put on anything.
We snuck him out the back door and pretended like he wasn't in there, and the police lost him, but he ended up getting arrested.
One thing MTV didn't report was that Lynn also performed a lewd act with a woman on stage, contributing to another reason the police wanted to arrest him. Fred Durst allegedly dared him to do the act. The police would set up a makeshift jail at Ozzfest. Lynn, when he was arrested, had weed in his pocket, and he didn't want to get a drug charge. In the area where he was being held, there was a giant tub of drinking water with ice. He would drop his drugs in the water, and when he was asked for his name by the arresting officer, he would claim he was Dave Mustaine. After he was released, Lynn asked if he could get a drink of water. He grabbed his drugs and left. Strait was initially charged with a misdemeanor, but it was eventually raised to a felony, according to MTV. The police soon realized he also wasn't Dave Mustaine, so they hit him with another charge. And according to Mikey, Lynn could have faced some serious jail time. But before he could go to trial, tragedy would strike the band. In the fall of 1998, Snot headed back into the studio to give their debut album a much-needed publicity boost. The band would team up with producer Ross Robinson to re-record the track The Box so it would sound more radio-friendly. It was during this final recording session they also wrote and recorded a new song called Absent, which would be their final song they wrote with Lynn. The band at the time were also dealing with internal problems. Guitarist Sonny Mayo would leave Snot sitting out of the Ozzfest shows, and Sonny would admit he was using hard drugs at the time and had a falling out with both Lynn and Mikey. It was also said that drummer Jamie Miller left around this time as well. Sonny would, however, rejoin Snot, playing their last several shows with Lynn. Then on December 11th, 1998, Snot would come to an abrupt and tragic end. According to MTV News, Lynn was en route from his home in Santa Barbara to Los Angeles on a Friday afternoon to visit a friend. While traveling on Coastal Highway 101 in his 1992 Ford Tempo, the frontman would be broadsided by a southbound full-size pickup truck as he tried to turn left across an opposing lane of traffic. The pickup truck driver was a 20-year-old student who was going 65 miles per hour and couldn't brake quick enough. The collision instantly killed Lynn and his dog Dobbs, who was in the back seat. The driver of the truck, meanwhile, would suffer a neck injury. He would be treated in hospital and released shortly afterwards. The stretch of highway which serves the residents of Muscle Shoals was said to be quite treacherous at the time. Visitors in Muscle Shoals residents, according to the LA Times, gain access to the northbound Highway 101 by crossing against southbound traffic. Lynn would be the third fatality to occur that year in only a 3-mile stretch of highway. Residents had long complained that there needed to be either an interchange built at this location or a speed reduction to improve safety. In fact, from 1994 to 1998, on a 3-mile stretch of this highway, there were over 120 injuries. Then 3 weeks after Lynn's death, Mikey tried to move on from his shock and grief by joining the group Soulfly. He would tell Modern Fix, "When Lynn died, we did the funeral, and it just didn't seem good enough for me. It was like, that's it, he's dead, okay, move on." And I was torn up about it. I was touring with Soulfly in Australia for like a month, playing for 50,000 people a day. It should have been the best time of my life, but I was on stage in front of thousands of people, upset about Lynn, and just dying inside. So I was like, let's do something for him. Surviving members of Snot would approach their label Geffen with the idea of putting out a tribute album with singers from different bands that they were friends with. But the label wanted no part of it, thinking logistically it would be a nightmare. The friends of Snot and other bands were signed to different labels, they had different managers, so trying to coordinate the whole thing probably didn't seem feasible. The surviving members were eventually released from their contract with Geffen, and they would shop around the idea to other labels, with a label named Immortal agreeing to do the project. But rather than going through record labels and managers, the members concocted an idea where they talked directly to their friends to make the process as easy as possible. The head of the label, a guy named Happy Walters, who also advised the surviving members of Snot, would tell Billboard, "I'm not condoning the way it was done, but it was the only way to get it done." For the tribute record, the surviving members of Snot got an advance, which they used to pay back Lynn's mom for all the money she helped them out with in their early days. Mikey soon started jamming with Toomer and drummer Shannon Larkin, and got friends of the bands to record vocals. They would enlist Serge from System of a Down, Corey Taylor of Slipknot, as well as Jonathan Davis of Korn, amongst many others. And to get the word out about the record, Pantera would pay tribute to Lynn prior to their set at Ozfest in 2000. There's also been this long rumor that the songs on the tribute record would have been on the next Snot album had Lynn not died, but that's not fully true. Mikey would admit on the Good Company with Bowling show that maybe 4 of the songs could have ended up on Snot's second record, but by the time Lynn had passed away, much progress hadn't been made on their second record. In the same interview, Mikey would admit that he wasn't happy with the tribute album, saying it was too difficult to do, and if he had to, he probably wouldn't do it again. The tribute album titled Straight Up would come out in November of 2000 and peak at number 56 on the Billboard charts. Then 2 years later, the band would put out their only live record titled Alive. The show was from 4 years earlier in Hollywood at the Palace. Mikey would admit on the Good Company with Bowling show that it was the only show that they properly taped during Snot's entire career. Mikey would also talk about Snot's future if Lynn hadn't passed away. He would tell Modern Fix, "That's pretty hard to say. I see a lot of bands out there like Papa Roach and all these other bands that are in the same style blowing up huge, so you never know. I think we would have done well." The band would reunite for the first time without Lynn in 2007 with vocalist Jeff Weber. The following year, Snot played some more shows with future Bad Wolves frontman Tommy Vext, and Vext would leave the project in 2014 and be replaced by Carl Bensley. The band's most recent tour dates happened in 2017. Mikey would reveal last year that there is a documentary that's currently being filmed about Lynn, but he didn't give any more details on when it would be released. Snot would be in the news for a strange reason in 2022. Limp Bizkit was out on tour at the time, and Fred Durst would actually perform on the Lynn Strait tribute album 20 years prior. It would turn out that Limp Bizkit was on the road with a rapper named Snot, who spelt his name with a $sign instead of an S, and this would result in Mikey Doling lashing out at Limp Bizkit for bringing a rapper named Snot on the road with him, and for the rapper stealing the band's name. The rapper would respond to Doling with a statement that read, "This actually ridiculous, old man mad about my name." That concludes today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, if you have suggestions for future topics you'd like to see me do, use the link in the description box below, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.